Grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, the podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. And happy Sunday. We're here. We're ready to record another episode of our canon study of Return of the Jedi. And we have another amazing guest, and I'm excited to get to him in just a few minutes. It's somebody that I know all of our listeners probably know already. He's one of the cornerstones of the Star Wars podcasting world, Star Wars world in general, really. So I'm excited that he's taking some time out of his Sunday to come and hang out and talk to me. But we'll get to Mr. Alex Damon in just a few minutes. Before we do that, a couple little housekeeping things. Thanks to those of you that are tuning in the live chat, our patrons that are supporting the work that Pete and I are doing. If you are new, if you're a patron, you already know all this. But Pete and I have teamed up. Pete from Around the Galaxy and I have partnered up together to do some more cool stuff. And that includes sharing a podcast stream. So one week you get Around the Galaxy, the next week you get Podcast of the Wills. We alternate those. You still get Pete's Disturbances in the Force on Saturday, the 5-minute news show, no clickbait, no spin, just what's been going on in the last week in Star Wars. This week was a great Disturbances in the Force. There was a lot of stuff, even late breaking news on Friday night with Mary Elizabeth Winstead being announced as a part of the cast of Ahsoka. Lots of fun stuff in there. And then also, because we have a bounty of Star Wars content coming at us this year, all through Disney Plus, Pete and I have resurrected the streaming Star Wars show. So on Friday nights, usually around 8 Central, 8:30, depending on what we've got going on, he and I are going live for about an hour. And like we say, it's kind of like sports talk radio, but for Star Wars. We're hanging out. We have a lot of fun friends in the live chat. It's not just patrons. It's open to everybody. And we've been able to bring in some fun guests. This past week, we had Patrick Kottner, who's the producer of the George Lucas Talk Show. We had a lot of fun talking to Patrick and, just kind of getting into what we thought about last week's episode. Looking ahead this week, Heather Antos is going to be joining us. And we're excited to talk to Heather because obviously she is a huge part of the Star Wars comic books and especially Black Chrysanthemum. So I can't wait to get some of her feedback, hear what she has to say about that. So lots of exciting stuff coming up. We've got some other guests we're working on for the last 2 episodes of streaming Star Wars. And then we may have a little bit of a break. I don't know how much because we've got rumors that Bad Batch is going to be dropping in the spring. We don't know when exactly that is, but Star Wars Insider had that last week. So we may have a few weeks off. We may not. It just depends on when the next streaming show drops and gives Pete and I a chance to hang out on a Friday night, have a drink, and talk about Star Wars with our friends. So thank you for tuning into all of that. Thanks for being here today. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to introduce my guest, but I'm going to let him do more of the introduction once he gets in here. But if you don't know Alex Damon, I don't know where you've been hiding because he is one of the hosts of Star Wars Explained, which is a fantastic YouTube channel. They do so many great videos, content, recaps, breakdowns. You name it, it's there. Alex is also a Schmodown trivia champion. Alex the Demon Damon, if you've ever paid any attention to Schmodown. In fact, Michael is in the chat and he dropped that already. He is, just kind of a jack of all trades. And so I'm really excited. In fact, one of the other things that I learned, I guess back during Potathon, Alex participated in that as well. Alex is also doing improv classes, and I'm super jealous of that because I would love to get into doing something like improv at some point. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in there, and it might even help make me a better podcast host. I don't know. We'll see. That's not the issue for today, but I am excited to welcome in Mr. Alex Damon. Alex, how's it going?
I'm good. You reminded me that I'm actually a former Schmodown trivia champion, so thanks for that.
Well, I wasn't trying to rub anything in.
No.
You've won far more Schmodown than I've won really in anything, so it's okay.
That's just my character right now in the Schmodown is a little burned about that, and so I'm just messing around.
play it off as much as you can. How are you?
I'm good. Just having a nice, relaxing weekend.
Outstanding.
As relaxing as it can be while Boba Fett's on.
That's right. There's always something going on, and I'm sure, especially at the level and the amount of content that you're creating on a regular basis, there's very little downtime, especially if you're also being kind enough to join folks like me and hang out and talk about it a little bit. So whatever little rest you get, I'm sure you deserve.
Yeah, I'm playing some board games with my friends later tonight, so we'll do that. But I had an idea for a video last night, and I was like, ah, dang it, and I wound up doing that today.
Is,
So I
I
could
was
try
going to
to
say,
take
is
the
that one of
weekends off.
those? Is that one of those things where you think you're not going to do it, but when it hits you in the moment, like, oh crap, here we go. Like it's no putting it off until office hours. Like you're just going to go do it.
Kind of. It's just like I try to relax on the weekends, and then just something will pop into my head, and I'm like, nah, I want to do that, and I want it to come out on Monday, so I have to make it on Sunday.
Totally fair. It's the burden of being a creative person. You get an idea, and as much as you want to go, well, I should work on that later. 5 minutes later, you're sitting in front of a computer or writing something down, and
Exactly.
I totally can relate to that. Well, as we get started tonight, especially for some of our audio listeners, um, I'd be surprised, we may have somebody who doesn't know Alex Damon, but tell us just a little bit about your backstory in general, who Alex is, and maybe kind of lead that into, your connections with Star Wars and Star Wars Explained and what you're doing.
Sure. My Star Wars journey began when I was like 8, I want to say. I think it was in 1995, and I was born in 87, where I saw someone in a Darth Vader costume and asked my dad about him and like, just who is that? And so he told me, and we went home and watched a tape they had of Star Wars from like TBS, fast forwarding through commercials and all that. So that started my obsession. I watched that tape like every day for the rest of that summer until it broke, and they were finally like, okay, I think he's probably into this. And so they got like the box set. And I don't really remember when I watched Empire or Jedi, or if they just let me wear myself out there. Like how long can we just let him watch the one movie before he realizes that there are more? But yeah, that just sparked my obsession. And I got into Star Wars like right at the perfect time, because Shadows of the Empire came out in 96, and that pulled me into the books. And then in 97, we got the special editions. And then in 99, it was the prequels. So I just like got to come into Star Wars right when so much was happening. And I had plenty of backlog in the books to keep me excited until the new movies came out. And I was young enough when episode 1 came out that I was just like fully in love with it, and I was so confused that some people didn't have that same reaction. I was like,
absolutely,
yeah, why do people not like this? It's great. It's more Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really interesting juxtaposition between the two of us, because I'm right at 10 or 11 years older than you. And so I was born in 78. And so I had the original trilogy. I've always had Star Wars, as have you. But I was a little bit older, like you, as you said it, to be 12 years old when the prequels hit. Like that's the perfect age. Like that's, prime territory. I was halfway through college. And so for what I had in my back pocket with the original trilogy, like you said, with the books, I received the prequels differently. And I was for a little while, ashamedly, in some of that camp of, I wasn't like setting my head on fire, but I also was saying, that's not, I always just used to say, that's not my Star Wars. I don't recognize that. I just stick to the whatever. I've since, of course, come way back around and recognize, the whole canon, the whole trilogy, or the whole saga. But I'm envious when I hear people like you talking about that. You said it exactly. It's the sweet spot. You got to come into these ones you caught up on. You had books, you probably had comics, and then all of a sudden you're right into special editions, prequels, and, it just took off from there.
Yeah. I feel like I lucked out generationally.
No, that's really neat. And so then, you grew up with the prequels, and then you headed off to college, and you did, the things that you did that kind of, started your career, and you end up at a point where, you're doing Star Wars Explained, and you're doing all the things that you're doing now pretty much all the time. Tell me a little bit about, coming into being able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I always liked, I don't even know if I want to say I always liked Star Wars trivia. I just was that I wound up learning a lot about Star Wars and remembering it. So I just got to be good at Star Wars trivia. And in 2012, I think, was the first year that I went to Dragon Con, which is an Atlanta convention. And they have, it's for all like things nerdy. So you had sci-fi and fantasy, Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, basically anything that has a fandom is represented at Dragon Con. And they do this trivia contest every year that is crazy hard. And I was like, on a whim, kind of like, I'll try it. And on my first year, I got into the top 10, which meant I got to like go up on the stage and answer questions. And I think I made it into the top 5, but like every year I would participate and I would do okay. And I was like, I'm going to study. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
finally actually study this stuff and see if I can win. And while I was doing that, I was also working at a marketing agency. So I was already
Mhm.
doing video marketing
Sure.
and learning about YouTube and stuff. And it was like, I think there'd be a market for short YouTube videos because a lot of the stuff I was seeing was really long. And I was like, I
Yeah.
don't have time to watch 50 minutes about so and so's life. So I was like, I'm going to make really short content just as a way for me to study, and maybe people will enjoy watching that as well. And
Yeah.
people did. So
Yeah.
that's how it started. And then it still took me 7 years to win the trivia contest. I won it in 2019 finally.
That's awesome. Well, and that trivia contest, and if anybody who's listening has never taken the opportunity to take the Dragon Con trivia, like every year after it's out, you can find it online somewhere. And if you feel really secure in your fanhood and you want to stay there, don't take it. But if you're curious, it's a fun. I've taken it. I think I've taken it 2 or 3 times when they've released it over the years, or when it gets put out on the internet and you can find it somewhere. Is it 50 questions? Is that right? The
Yeah.
original, like the first, it's 50 questions. The best I've ever done is 24. And
That's not
I'm just
bad.
like, I just look at it and to know, and I know a bunch of crap, and like I can win pub Star Wars trivia, which is a very different animal. It's not Schmodown. It's not, as intense as the Dragon Con one is. But like the first time I ever took one, I'm pretty sure I got like 18 or 19 one of the years. And I was just like, I really questioned everything about my Star Wars fandom for a minute. But it is really impressive. And, for you, like you said, to go through 7 years of a journey to get to the point where you win it. We've seen, I know Marie Wilson won it this last year. In fact, did she win it back to back?
Two in a row.
2
Yeah.
years in a row. And she's another fellow Alabamian. She's in Birmingham. But it's neat to see that. And of course, with this community that we have, it's neat for me to kind of look at people and go like, oh, I kind of know who that person is. And it adds credibility to all the other things you're doing, I think, in my opinion. And so you did that. You started, doing the YouTube videos, and, I think probably just over putting in effort and being consistent over time, Star Wars Explained has really blown up and has become a big thing.
Yeah, I think the consistency is probably the key. That's usually what I tell people who want to get started into podcasting or YouTubing or whatever, but specifically YouTube. It's like they want you to be consistent. And
Right.
that's kind of, I had that plan going into it. My original idea was like, I made 150 videos like before I started anything. They were all these short little things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to just like schedule them all and just like let it go and see what happened. And so I had like a backlog before I even put out my first video, but then people started to watch them really quickly, and I was like, oh man, I can't. Like, I just wasn't happy with all of those kind of cookie cutter videos I did, and I threw most of them out and started from scratch.
Sure.
But yeah, that's I always tell people consistency is
absolutely. Well, and it's also neat, and we've gotten to watch this. Those of us that have followed your channel and followed what you've done for a while now. Something else that I think is really special about it is that you get to do it with your wife, and that you and Molly do, videos together, and, she does things on her own, you do stuff on your own, but it kind of brings together this opportunity to have a shared passion with a spouse and to, bring that element into it too. Has that been something that, in those moments where you get a late night inspiration and have to get up and do it, does she go, what are you doing? Or is she like, oh yeah, that's a good one, go knock it out?
A little bit of both. Sometimes I'm definitely a bit of a workaholic and need to dial it back, but she understands. And the more fun part of it is just seeing how someone else enjoys their fandom, where like, absolutely. I love trivia, but I certainly don't think that that's like you say, that you shouldn't question your fandom if you take the Dragon contest and don't do well. It's like, I don't know, knowing what kind of blaster rifles stormtroopers use doesn't mean anything. Really, it's not important to Star Wars. That's right. But like Molly is really into cosplay, which I am not so much, but it's really fun to see her side of the fandom and what she appreciates out of Star Wars and how it's different from mine, which I think that makes me a better and more understanding fan as a whole.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that hits on something that I have thought about as well, where there's something special in any fandom, but of course for me in Star Wars, because that's my primary thing. I love pop culture of all kinds. I grew up with Indiana Jones. I love, the Marvel stuff. I've got 4 daughters that I talk about all the time, and they are, as a general rule, they're not super girly girls, princess girls. Like, they're all obsessed with Marvel right now. One of them's a Thor person, one of them's a Loki girl. Like, so we have all these different dynamics, but there's something really special in being able to experience a fandom through someone else, especially someone like a significant other. Like, I think what you said is a perfect example. You're a trivia guy, she's a cosplay person, but what we've also seen, if you pay attention to, Schmodown and that stuff, like, she's gravitated towards becoming a little bit of a trivia girl. And we've certainly seen you in X-Wing pilot costumes and, doing some of that kind of stuff along the way. And so I think even especially because one of the things we deal with in Star Wars is, moments where we go, I don't like that. Sometimes all we need is to see somebody else enjoy that thing and go, oh, that's what's fun about it. Taking my kids to see Rogue One, which of course I loved Rogue One from the beginning, but like, to watch my kids watch Rogue One and see that wonder of a child, like, that makes all the difference. The different ways into a fandom, into a Star Wars or anything else. I think y'all represent that really well, I guess, is ultimately what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. I mean, that kind of stems from a philosophy that we had going into making the channel. When I was getting into YouTube, not only were there a lot of long videos, there were also a bunch of videos bashing the prequels. And I was just like, I'm never, ever going to make a video that makes someone, like, if someone watches one of my videos and then they feel bad for enjoying that thing I was talking about, I'm like, I never want that to happen.
Sure.
So that was kind of the rule I set for myself from the start, regardless of, because there certainly are Star Wars stories that they're not for me. Absolutely. But I just want to be critical without trashing anything, or specifically trashing people who do enjoy it.
Absolutely. And that's something that, certainly the internet has done a lot of wonderful things for us, but I think one of the things that it has not done us a favor in is, certainly over the last several years, we've lost the ability to be constructively critical about something without somebody assuming that means you hate it, or, because we could all pick something in Star Wars that we watched and went, that wasn't my favorite. I wish they had done this. I wish they had done that. And that's a perfectly legitimate feeling or comment to have. But instead, it's either you're mad or you're happy. Like, we've drawn these very specific, X's and Y's that you're either this or you're that. There's no in between. And I love when I see people on any kind of social media, any kind of YouTube channel, any kind of, podcast, or whatever, that can have that discussion and go, you know what, this wasn't my favorite part, but it's not for me. It's clearly for you, or it's clearly for somebody else. And more than anything else, if we really don't like it that much, why are we still here? Like, I say all the time, if I went to a restaurant and I didn't like it, I wouldn't keep going back to that restaurant just so I could tell everybody how much I don't like that restaurant. Like, why am I still here? Just go eat somewhere I like. And that's what, unfortunately, we see happening in all fandom, but certainly in Star Wars more often than not. But you guys have always been a great, we talk about spark of positivity around here and throw that hashtag out whenever we can. Y'all are certainly a part of that group that, Star Wars is fun. Let's have fun. And if we don't like it, let's just keep going. There's other Star Wars coming, especially where we are now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's such a numbers game. And that was when they announced the Disney acquisition. I was like, and they were like, we're doing a movie every year. I was like, oh boy, like, I know that I'm going to love some of them. And I also know that I won't. And I'm just like, got to be ready for both. But that's kind of how I feel about Star Wars in general, is for the most part, everything I watch, I'm like, cool, Star Wars. But it's often down the middle for me. And then just occasionally I'll hit something that I'm like, I love that to death. Like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I was like, this might as well have been made for me. That's one of my favorite things they've done in the past 5 years. So it's worth it to me to go through all the stuff where I'm just like, yeah, cool. I like that. I like that. Not so much that, but then you find that one thing that you weren't expecting to love and you really, really love it.
the thing you reach a point where you feel like your friends and family are gonna be like, okay, you can stop talking about that now. We get
Yeah.
it. We know how much you love it. That's me in Rebels. And as somebody
Mhm.
who's of the age that I am, like I didn't catch Rebels I didn't catch Clone Wars when it was on.
Yeah, me neither.
I was older. I was out of college. I was working. I had a family. And, Clone Wars still is not my most favorite. But again, like so many things, I come to appreciate it in light of other things. But Rebels hit me in a way that I really feel like it's some of the best Star Wars storytelling in the Disney era because of the Kanan and Ezra story, the lore, of course, found family, which is such a key part of Star Wars. Like that show, for whatever reason, hit me in a way that other things that we've gotten, like you said, the last 5, 6, 7 years has not. And I talk about it every chance I get, to the point where sometimes I'm going, have I become that guy? Do I need to dial it back a little bit? But everybody has that thing, like you said, whether it's Fallen Order or Rebels or, whatever it is. It's neat that we can all have that and all share that together at different levels.
Mhm. I love Rebels because I consider it as basically helping me become a better fan. I
Mhm.
remember when it was first being advertised, and I was like, "Oh man, this is what Star Wars Disney's going to be like. It's a cartoon." And I hadn't seen the Clone Wars, and I was just, I don't know, I didn't like the art style, but I was like, "I'm doing this channel. I should probably watch it." So I watched it, and I think 3 or 4 episodes in, I was like, "This is great. Like this, it sucked me in. I'm really into it." So that was just one of those things where I was being uh, I had a crappy attitude for no reason,
Right.
hadn't even given it a shot, and then I gave it a
I
shot and I was like, "Okay."
in full disclosure, that's me with Resistance. Like I've seen a few episodes here and there, but I haven't sat down and just watched the whole thing. And it's on my to-do list to pick that up because I know there's good stuff in there. I just need to have that same moment where I go, It's another fun Star Wars story. What am I complaining about? It's more
Yeah.
Star Wars."
Yeah, it's not as good as Rebels, but it does have some cool things here or there. Like again, I think it's worth it to give it a watch for the
Absolutely.
moments of greatness. And it's so short.
That's right. Well,
Only
and
two
we've said
seasons.
many times, we're currently experiencing an embarrassment of riches in Star Wars
Hmm.
content, with certainly the things that we've gotten in the last few years and what we know is coming even just this year. And we're going to may hit on that in a minute. But what I want to do, because we're going to transition in a minute into our canon study. But one of the questions I ask for my guest whenever we're digging into a movie, doing our canon study episodes, is regards whatever movie it is. You talked about seeing the original trilogy, as a kid, and kind of seeing them all together and not having any specific, not necessarily knowing when you saw it first. But do you have any kind of early memories of Return of the Jedi? Since that's what we're digging into tonight, is there anything that stands out from those early days?
The early day, and it was fortunate because it's part of what we're going to be talking about today. But anytime I think about Return of the Jedi, I go to the speeder bikes first.
Yep.
That was my favorite scene as a kid. I was like, the speeder bikes are awesome. They're so fast. They're so cool. They sound great. I loved the speeder bike chase
For
growing up.
sure. Well, and for me, it's the right there along. It's those biker scout troopers. Those
Mhm.
scout troopers are one of my favorite Star Wars. I mean, it's classic trooper, biker scout, and probably like a tie between death troopers and shore troopers right after that. Those are the ones I love so much. But the fact that I need Black Series to do a scout trooper helmet is something that I'm desperately overdue for. But yeah, I love exactly that, and that's such a key part of that movie, is getting to see those speeder bikes. And of course, as a behind the scenes nerd, when we were growing up and got to see the videos of how they did that, and the developments of Steadicam and all that kind of stuff, is just endlessly fascinating and adds to this great movie that is another part of this lore that we love so much. um, that's awesome. The other question that I like to ask, and I ask all my guests this, or have recently in this newer version of the show, um, because we dig into Star Wars like a sacred text, I say all the time, it's kind of like we're doing a Bible study, but instead of the Bible, we're using Star Wars. So it begs the question, at what point in your life, and it could be a first time you saw something, it could be an experience you had at a celebration, whatever it is, what is Alex's Star Wars spiritual experience? What is the thing where Star Wars hits you in a big way, in a different way, in something different than just like, oh yeah, I really like these movies? Like, what was that one, special spiritual moment maybe that you've had, if you can put your finger on one?
I don't know if it's a specific thing, but just in general, especially as we've built like an audience or a platform or
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it, something I hadn't really anticipated when I was becoming a content creator was just, all the drama that comes into Star Wars
Sure.
sometimes, and when you should and shouldn't speak out about something. Like, when is it worth it to get into an
Right.
argument?
At what point
When,
do you
yeah,
engage? Pick your battles. Right.
right. And that's a very Star Wars thing, is like, when do you stand up and fight,
Hmm.
or when do you lean into diplomacy? But also just the idea that not letting fear control what you do. And that's just something that over the years I've been realizing that, like, oh, I think I just don't want to step into this right now because I'm just afraid of what someone is going to say, instead of just like this isn't a pick your battles thing.
Sure.
It's like this is something that could have consequences
Hmm.
towards us, but it's like, it's worth saying. So I think it's
Absolutely.
more just about not letting fear control your actions, and that's
Hmm.
something that Star Wars definitely preaches.
Well,
It's funny that you
that's
talk
very
about this
Jedi.
being, yeah, it's funny you talk about this being kind of like a Bible study, because I've been really digging into the Clone Wars fortune cookies, the messages.
Uh-huh.
I've been
Yeah,
using them a lot recently in videos, just as uh, extra support for any argument I'm making, where I'm like, this
absolutely.
is basically the book of George Lucas,
Hmm.
like uh, season 1, chapter 1. And here's the verse. I
Oh
feel like
man,
I'm quoting
that's
that stuff a
outstanding.
lot.
I haven't thought about that before, and instantly, of course, again, as a content creator, my mind starts going to all these different ways that you could use those things, and plugging it in. That's really cool. Um, I love that you're doing that. That's awesome. I like this comment from one of our patrons. Framey says, "Avoiding online arguments is like avoiding trees while riding speeder bikes. It's usually a good idea." Um, and we're going to get into that. So, as we transition into our canon study, the minutes that we had today were, I think, 53 something to like an hour and 22 minutes and 30 seconds. So, basically, what we have is Han, Leia, Chewie. They're on the shuttle Tidarian and they're jumping to hyperspace, heading towards Endor. We get Vader and the Emperor as the Emperor arrives on Death Star 2. And I love that scene right there for that quick minute, because we also get the Emperor's little royal, I forget what they're called, the royal guy, the purple guy, um, the royal ambassador or whatever he is. We get that quick shot of those guys just huddled off to the corner. That eventually they get action figures, even though they don't really do anything, which is also very Star Wars. So we get that. We get the conversation with Vader and the Emperor about Luke, and here's what you need to do. We get the speeder bike chase. We get, and this is a big section. This is almost 30 minutes of the movie that I gave you. We get the Ewoks capturing our crew of rebels and the 3PO guide, moment. And then we wrap up the dignitaries. That was what I was looking for. But then we wrap up these minutes with Luke and Han and Leia having that conversation outside the Ewok village, where Luke's telling Leia, "You're my sister." He goes away. Han shows up and has that little moment. So there's a ton of stuff in these moments, or in these minutes. Let me ask you our first question. I just want to hear your thoughts kind of right out of the bat. The first question I always ask when we do our canon studies is, what is our text telling us? And for me, I usually view this as kind of, what is the literal interpretation of what are we getting out of these minutes?
So just literally what's happening on the
Yeah,
screen. And
absolutely. What are the literal kind of, things that you're seeing that stand out to you?
well, that's the speeder bike always stands out to
Yeah.
me. But yeah, I see a lot of the conflict between Vader and Luke, kind
Hmm.
of, even though they're not face to face, just reminding the audience that that's kind of the core of this story, is Luke having to go back and confront Vader, knowing he got his butt kicked the last movie, um, knowing they can sense each other, they kind of know that this is coming. I think a lot of those scenes are about building up towards that confrontation, even though they haven't seen each other at all.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, You hit right on it. The conflict is a big part of what I saw. And one of the things that I highlighted was one of my notes was there is a wide range of emotions, especially in the top part of this clip, because Han is very cocky and assured. They're on the shuttle, and that's a Han Solo thing. But we've also seen, glimpses of the other side of that on Bespin, at Jabba's palace when he gets thawed out. There's some less cocky Han moments, but they're on the shuttle. He's like, yeah, it's going to be fine. We're going to go. And of course, we get one of my favorites, which is fly casual.
Mm-hmm.
Luke is doubting. Luke is on that shuttle with them, doubting the decision to come. And he says, I shouldn't have come. He's going to know. He's already thinking about, have I jeopardized my friends? What is this doing for everybody else? He's thinking of more than himself. For Vader, I kind of pick up anxiety. Like, he's having that conversation with the Emperor as the Emperor is coming off the shuttle, coming onto the Death Star 2. And he's anxious because Vader wants to get to Luke. Like, that's his focus at this point is, I really want to connect with my son. I figured out, the pieces are falling into place. And then the Emperor is living in this kind of confident puppet master mode. He's pulling the strings and he's saying, yeah, this is what you need to do. You need to go, take the fleet to the other side of the moon, do all that. So we get this wide range of emotions that show up in the first part of this clip that's going to set us up for how do those things play out. So that was one of my first little interpretations, is just we're getting kind of the widespread of human emotion if we were to boil it down. Does that track for you? Is that something that kind of, stands out?
Yeah. And I, in addition to just doubt with Luke, I'm sensing fear and kind of the same thing. He doesn't want to hurt his friends, which leads later to him leaving them to go confront Vader.
Absolutely. Well, and even at that point, even though he hasn't talked to Leia yet, he knows she's his sister. So he's also carrying that extra. It's not just my friends, it's my family. A couple of the other things that I had is we get, of course, the 3PO is a god runner as the Ewoks capture the band of heroes. I thought that one set up some interesting stuff. And then, of course, the last part of it is Luke and Leia and Han having that conversation on the bridge outside the village towards the end, and you get some really human moments in that as well. You get uncertainty followed up immediately by Leia saying, somehow I've always known. Like, she's talking about remembering her mother, but then she's saying, yeah, but this makes sense. And that, to me, that speaks to like a gut thing as humans and as, spiritual people who are connected to the world and each other. Like, we have those same gut moments. We have those same kind of connections. And then on the flip side of that coin, Han shows up and he's jealous. Like that, that jealousy speaks right off the bat, but it's capped in such a sweet way with when he, hesitates, he turns around and she says, hold me. And he holds her and he doesn't know what's going on, but he's there for her.
Yeah.
And I think those are the literal moments. And that's what, this first question really is about, is we're getting a widespread of emotion. We're getting people dealing with real things. And one of the other things, as we get into our second question, the second question is, what is the text asking of me? And I think this is the one where we kind of start to dig into, the more inspirational things that we pull out of the text. The first read is literal. The second read is, what is it telling me inspirationally? What am I pulling out of this? So what are your inspirations that maybe you get from these minutes?
The main thing that I pulled out of all of these, most of these scenes, is to be compassionate, where we get the line from the Emperor who says that Luke's compassion for Vader will be his undoing, where he views compassion as a weakness, but we're seeing through all the other actions of the actions of the other characters that it's a strength. And I really like that you can kind of see it through even the Ewoks, where Wicket meets Leia. Leia bonds with him, offers him food, shows him kindness, which he probably hasn't experienced if he's run into Imperials.
Right.
But you can contrast that with Han meeting the Ewoks, and he's really the only one not showing compassion, but he's being very aggressive, pulling his blaster out, and Luke has to be the one to calm him down. But Han's actions lead to him nearly being cooked. So
Yes, they
we
do.
see kind of the difference between these two characters and how they are compassionate towards complete strangers.
Hmm.
Um, but we also see Han kind of turn back around, like you mentioned, with his hesitation, that sweet moment. Like, even though he doesn't understand what's going on, he knows he still loves
Right.
Leia, and that
Hmm.
what he just did was fueled by jealousy, and it wasn't
Sure.
cool. So he goes back, he shows some compassion, and they have that moment together. But just knowing where it's all leading, where Luke and his compassion for Vader wind up being his superpower, and it
Yep.
winds up saving Vader.
Hmm.
That I liked kind of pulling out these little moments of compassion in places I hadn't looked for it before.
Sure. Well, and I think you hit on something, especially with those Han moments, because Han Solo has always been, if nothing else, a fly by the seat of your pants, cocky, self assured. We're going to figure it out. I love the moments in Last Jedi. It works out every time. Most of the time, almost, like that's Han. And so in those moments with Leia, he reacts, emotionally and viscerally right off the bat, but then he catches himself a second later and realizes, I shouldn't have done that. And that hits me, as a father. I have plenty of moments where, my kids do something. The example I used recently was my 5-year-old. She runs through our house constantly, and that's what kids do. Kids run, like they're just full of energy and whatever. But every time my child runs in my house, she gets hurt. She falls down. She runs into someone. Last night, she was running and smacked her head on the door frame. And I'm like, I have to catch myself in those moments when she gets hurt to not have the first words out of my mouth be, "See, I told you not to run." I need my first moments to be, "Are you okay? Is everything good?" And then later go, "Hey, remember that thing about running?" And that, like, that's Han. Han had that moment where he fired off with jealousy and frustration and whatever, but it caught him quickly to go, "Wait, that's not what I'm," because he loves her, like you said. It's a big thing. Um, and so I see those moments of compassion, and it ties into something else that I made as a note. And I'd love your thoughts on this. I talked about having such a wide spread of emotions, in the literal part of this, but nobody has the opportunity to sit in those emotions and really like sort them out, because what we
Mhm.
have immediately is speeder bike chases and quick run-ins with the Empire. It's not like we're going to get down there, we're going to camp out for a few days, we're going to kind of sort out how we feel. It's fast forward. And so even while they're dealing with complex emotions, much like real life, we're all dealing with complex emotional things all the time. We have to take action. We have to deal with what's coming at us, because life a lot of times is not going to wait for you to sort out your feelings to be ready to throw something else at you. And so to me, that felt very real world. Yeah, we're all dealing with difficulties and hard times and personal family issues or whatever it might be, but everything has to keep moving. And that's no exception for our heroes here. They're thrown right into the thick of being captured and being chased and all of that. And I thought that was a one-to-one kind of real world thing that I hadn't noticed as much before.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's Star Wars is always very like go go go. Uh,
Yes.
doesn't give anyone time to process their emotions, which is kind of, it makes me think about the Rise of Skywalker. I remember when they took that scene to slow down between Zori and Poe, and I was like, this is great. Like, I really really liked that scene. That it makes those moments even more special.
Right. Absolutely. Um, the other one that stood out to me kind of in this inspirational moment, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on it, because of course, one of the hallmarks of these movies are the Ewoks. And especially for people who grew up with these movies, it's a very George Lucasy kind of thing to have something cute and cuddly and fuzzy to draw kids in, to have toys off of, all that kind of stuff. Um, Allies. For me, inspirationally, we need allies in our life. And more often than not, at least in my real world experiences, most of the time, the allies that are going to help me the most don't come from the places I expect them to. And I think that speaks to, in this moment, they get trapped, they get wrapped up. We, of course, always make our jokes about the Ewoks being cannibals because of, the helmets and the different things. But pretty quickly, even beyond, I think, the 3PO is a god thing, there becomes this found partnership. And, again, to use the favorite Star Wars cliche, this found family. And to me, it was signified in the one little Ewok hugging Han's leg as they're, we've been accepted into the tribe, and he gets the leg hug, but at the same time, he's like, ugh, why is this thing on me? I love that found partnership and allyship sometimes comes from places it's not expected. And that was something else that stood out to me.
Well, I mean, we're still dealing with that in Star Wars now with Book of Boba Fett. You can't make it far without a tribe. And I think the Book of Boba Fett is a story of a selfish man, a loner, building a tribe, really becoming a leader of a new tribe. But Star Wars from the start has been about selfishness versus selflessness, and communities working together for the greater good instead of just for yourself. So I think that the Ewoks, that's a good illustration that it's not just, humankind working together, but it's the whole galaxy banding together, working together so that the entire galaxy will thrive and not just humans. And maybe George wanted to make that even more, like drive that point home even further, where it's like, no, it's not just humans. And Return of the Jedi is also, I think, the first movie where we see non-humans in the Rebel Alliance. So I think that that's probably something that he wanted to do in the past. I mean, what Wookiees were supposed to be flying X-Wings in the Battle of Yavin in his first couple rough drafts.
Right.
So I think it's something he always wanted to show and just couldn't until Jedi.
Absolutely. Well, and it's so neat because, I initially compared it to, we get the Ewoks, they capture the rebels, they capture our heroes. And the first thing that kind of saves them is they think 3PO is a god, which is its own funny, just played for comedic moments, played for some of that kind of stuff. One of my favorite things about that is as 3PO kind of starts to soak that up a little bit, the irritation that Han has because of this. Like, really, this is the thing that's going to get us out of this? Like, you can just almost feel him being annoyed by it. But there's also an aspect to the Ewoks, and you said it before, treated differently than as they were treated by the Empire, as the Imperials have encountered Ewoks having a base on Endor, that kind of thing. I don't want to minimize the Ewoks by comparing them just to dogs, but you can even get it with like kids. Like, people can sense who's good and who's bad. And like, we have this base instinct inside of us to be able to recognize, kids know when somebody's an a-hole. Like, my kids on plenty of times have seen, a politician or somebody on TV in a speech, in a debate, in a something, and they're like, they're not nice. Like, I remember them specifically telling me one time about a certain politician. He seems like the kind of person that would push an old lady into the street. And I was just like, there's something profound in a child being able to, sort out who's good and who's bad. And Ewoks, of course, we know a lot of the Ewoks were, children and whatever, but like the ability, it's light and dark, it's good and evil. It's the whole of what Star Wars is. I pick up moments of the Ewoks being able to recognize, oh, these aren't our enemy. These are our friends. These are people that we can help and want to help us get rid of these other guys who have been making our life difficult up to this point. So there's another, I don't know, third sense, second sense, being able to determine something deeper than just what's on the surface, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think George would completely agree with you. The truly wonderful the mind of a child is. Yep. And I mean, he made these movies to speak to kids who were becoming adults and growing up. So I think you're right on the money with people who can just. I guess I use the Force as a metaphor for conscience a lot of times, because they're always, especially in the Clone Wars, they're like, and in the Empire Strikes Back, you'll know what the light side is when you are at peace and when you were at calm. Right. If you like stop and think about something, you will know what the right decision is. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I think Lucas views at least part of the Force.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. Well, the third question that we usually get to as we do our canon study is, where is the text sending us from here? And the way I always kind of paint this is, what is the practical application that you, Alex Damon, have pulled out of watching these moments and kind of digging in a deeper way? What is something that it speaks directly to you that you may be able to apply, going forward in your life?
The compassion is never a weakness, and something that I think we see with Han, and what I consider to be one of the themes of Return of the Jedi is with Darth Vader, is that it's never too late to show compassion, to make the right choice. You might be like Han, where you say the mean thing and you start to storm off, but it's like, if you know that what you just did was wrong, like, just take that pause, turn around, and say you're sorry.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And I think that actually lines up a lot with what I was thinking as well, which is, it's not always about me. And I use the example of, I think the thing that hit me as much as anything through all these moments was that last couple of minutes with Luke and Han and Leia on the bridge outside the Ewok village. And I see, like I've used the example already with my kids, as a father, as a husband, as somebody who has responsibilities at work, having that moment to step back and weigh, what is my reaction going to be, to weigh, how am I encountering something, but also who am I encountering? What are they going through? Trying to put myself into a position to recognize, to recognize their life is different than mine. What they're dealing with is different than what I'm dealing with. And to be able to have, like you said, compassion and not automatically react by firing from the hip and then sorting out the carnage and the damage later. Han did shoot first. We all know that, but that's also a journey for him too, because that's Han in Star Wars, not Han in Return of the Jedi, who is also being shaped and changed by this woman he's coming to love. And I think for all of us, and especially in the world today, and we've hit on it a couple times along this way as we've chatted, especially in Star Wars fandom, especially in the internet, which is a terrible place for us to all to try and interact with each other most of the time. There's also that moment when we want to go, I can't believe that person said that. Watch this biting, fiery, terrible thing that I'm going to respond back to them. And instead of stepping back and going, why do I want to respond that way? What is driving me to feel like I have to do that? And there's a difference, and there's something, and you've talked about this, standing up for marginalized peoples. That's a big thing we're seeing right now. Blackout Star Wars Eclipse is a big conversation in this fandom. And, I've heard you guys talk about it. I've talked about it, like there are people in this fandom that are Star Wars fans that are just as important as the rest of us, that want to be recognized and that want to be accepted and seen as the whole people that they are. And so there becomes a moment when I go, am I standing up for something because I want to get into a fight, or am I standing up for something because it is what I'm supposed to do and it is the right thing? And I think I see that in Han. He has his jealousy moment, but it fades very quickly when he turns around and he kind of wants to say, I'm sorry, but Leia says, hold me. And that's all she needs. She needs somebody to be there for her. And he has the ability to do that. And so I think for me, the takeaway is weighing my reactions and deciding, am I going to stand up for what's right? And am I going to be able to recognize, because I've paid attention to, is this the moment to get into that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, the Blackout Star Wars Eclipse thing is exactly kind of one of the things that I was thinking about earlier when I said, like, am I wanting to speak out to attack, or is it to defend? And at this point, it's because you're defending a group of fans who, many of them we are friends with.
Absolutely.
They feel this way, and they're just really confused more than anything of like, why did Lucasfilm choose like this company when there are other options out there? And that, to me, that's something definitely worth putting out as a defense of someone else, instead of so many people want to go on the internet and attack, and that's light side and dark side as well, that you use the Force, you use your power for knowledge and defense, and never attack.
Yes. Well, and I think too, and this is one that always stands out for me, and I've said this many times, I live in Montgomery, Alabama, and we have done nothing if not had our share of, hot cultural moments over the course of history with the civil rights movement and all of that kind of stuff. And with this past Monday being the celebration of Dr. King's birthday, one of the things that always stands out to me is and I'm going to get the quote wrong, so I'm not going to try, but it's the silence of our friends, the silence of our out. I want to be able to stand up for my friends and my family that I love, whether it's racism, who you love, something like Blackout Star Wars Eclipse. Like you said, so many people that I am good friends with in this fandom are members of the LGBTQ plus community, and they're no less important than I am, and they're no less important than any other Star Wars fan. And so to be able to stand up and be a voice for them because they deserve it just as much as that's a choice that I feel like is a no-brainer. And I feel like that's a choice that is inspired by the things I see in Star Wars and inspired by the moments I see here in Return of the Jedi, because Han was embarrassed, maybe he was jealous, maybe, but he also knew she needs me and I need to be there for her. And the rest of it was going to be sorted out along the way. And it is. So that was powerful. So I really love that. Let me ask you this as we get ready to wrap up. If you could pull out, and I think I know what you're going to say, but we'll see what happens. I'm usually wrong about this. If you could assign a theme to this segment of the movie that we just watched, it could be one word. It could be, because what I've done in previous episodes and in previous movies, like for Empire, the 6 chapters I broke it down into, I pre-assigned the theme. And I said, okay, this week we're talking about such and such. And I decided for Return of Jedi, and intentionally I didn't want to assign a theme because I want to see if, what my guest sees is the same thing I see, because we all interpret stuff differently. So do you have a theme that you see coming out of this?
Yeah, I think you're right that you've probably guessed what I'm going to say, but I would say that compassion is a strength. Yep. That would be
absolutely.
My theme.
Absolutely. And I think that also that applies even to the Vader moments. And we didn't dig into those as much as I thought we might, because there's still so much there. But like Vader's got an underlying compassion, even if it's not a burning compassion yet. Like it's his son. And that
I wrote down that I think this is the first time, especially to the Emperor, that he's like, my son is with them, and not just Correct. Skywalker is with them.
That's right. Yeah, that you're seeing those little subtle nods and the little subtle changes that are heading towards what we know is coming at the end of the movie. But I would say the same thing. I would say compassion. I think that's a perfect way to kind of encapsulate these moments, because it comes around in all the different things we see. It's energy, it's love, it's protectionism, which is certainly a part of compassion. So yeah, I agree with you completely. Great job. You passed the test.
Yes.
Well, as we wrap up, tell everybody where they can find you, what you guys have got going on. I know y'all are doing Book of Boba Fett stuff every week. This episode will come out in a couple weeks from now, but what can we expect from Star Wars Explained in the near future?
So right now we're doing Book of Boba Fett coverage mostly. That it seems like it's dominating everything, but we'll be continuing that with everything else coming out this year, with the Bad Batch and Andor and Kenobi and Mando season 3. We will do reviews and Easter egg videos and live streams about all of the new episodes. When nothing new is coming out on the TV, we've still got plenty of books and comics that we try to cover everything almost on equal ground if we can. Like it's been crazy trying to keep up with the High Republic and the Book of Boba Fett at the same time, but I love covering the books and the comics as well. So we're just trying to keep up with everything as it comes out and give it all the coverage it deserves.
That's awesome. Well, I truly can't thank you enough for hanging out today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I do want to throw a special thank you to all of our patrons, to those of you that support ATG Cast, to the shows that I'm doing, the stuff Pete's doing, the stuff that we're doing together. We're streaming Star Wars on Friday nights. We're having a lot of fun with that. We look forward to every Friday night, like I said, pouring a drink, talking about Star Wars with our friends, and y'all are a big part of that. To our audio listeners, if you are not a patron already and you want to sign up for that, you can go to patreon.com/ATGcast, and that will allow you to watch when we record these episodes live. There's other levels. You can get stickers, all kinds of different stuff. It's a lot of fun. It's really worth it. As little as $3 a month, you can be a part of, again, watching when we record live and hanging out and contributing to the shows. Y'all are a big part of who we are and what we do, and I can't thank you enough for that. I'm excited for all the things that are coming up. We've got a couple more episodes of Return of the Jedi canon study. And then I have made the decision, and I don't know if I've talked about this yet on one of the shows, but when we finish Return of the Jedi, we're going to go with release orders. So we're going to move into Phantom Menace after this and work through the prequels and, kind of travel that path. Because so far we've just done Star Wars and Empire. And I've already got some fun guests lined up. I'm working on that. So thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for being a part of Podcast of the Wills and supporting all the stuff that we've done over these years. And until we're together again next time, may the force be with you always.